as we get closer to the fantasy playoffs, who are those guys out there on waivers that might be sleepers ready to help you win down the stretch? Let's find out. Welcome back, Fantasy Endgame community. I'm Pierre, here with more waiver wire pickups that could help you win as we approach week 11. But we've already covered those guys who could help you this week. Now we're going to look ahead as we do with some early waiver wire stashes and potential breakouts. Now, you know there's been a lot of talk about Kadarius Toney, had him featured on this week's waiver wire pickups, and he looks like a strong start. You can flex him out, maybe even throw him as a wide receiver 3 in based on what's going on in KC. But let's look deeper, because now we know that Mecole Hardman is on IR and will miss at least 4 weeks with an abdomen issue. Juju Smith-Schuster shouldn't be out long term. He's going to probably miss this week with concussion, but you know there's always a chance of recurrence or an extended absence. So if we look at, well, who else in this KC offense could be valuable? A lot of people, because this is Kansas City. They'll spread the ball around. We know there's a lot of receivers that could have big games at any given moment. Well, we also have talked about a guy named Justin Watson, because you may not realize this, but last week when Juju did go out, Hardman was not playing, Justin Watson got 73% of the offensive snaps. Sky Moore, promising rookie, his number has not really changed. He's kind of been stagnant there. He's only on the field like a quarter of the time, gets like 1, maybe 2 targets. That is it. Clearly not ready to take a big role in this offense. Justin Watson is a guy who put up big preseason numbers, which really don't mean that much when it comes down to it, but obviously there's some trust here. He looks like the guy who might step up next and potentially be the number 3 receiver in this team given the injury situation. So he is a deep sleeper this week, but again, looking at the fact that Hardman is now out long term and Juju, you never really know. Watson is a guy who's kind of a sneaky stash here that you could throw in plus matchups. So I don't expect huge numbers from him this week, but again, this is somebody who might be flex worthy in the coming future. And now let's talk about Arizona. One of the big surprising news developments this past week was that they just released Eno Benjamin. Just like that. No real official reason why, and it came to a surprise to everybody, including Benjamin himself. I mean, he hadn't been great, in replacing James Conner. Maybe James Conner's performance this past week when he looked kind of his vintage self, maybe they made them think that they don't need Eno, but they kind of do, because he was a serviceable backup. He had been good in the preseason. He had his moments. He had some experience on the team, but now he's gone. He's off to Houston. But I'm not going to advocate stashing him. I'm going to talk about his backup, who is now the number 2 and a high end handcuff behind James Conner. That's Keontae Ingram. So this is a rookie, somebody who had played time both at UT in Austin and USC in college. He's somebody who, he's got some ability to break away. He doesn't have blazing speed, but he can do things in the open field with the ball in his hands. He just has to get to the open field. But look, Arizona's offense hasn't been great, but there is some value here because this is a team that can move the ball. When Kyler Murray is back and healthy, this offense can put up some points. Keontae Ingram can catch the ball. He's somebody who is really not going to have standalone value as long as Conner is healthy. But again, you're talking about a handcuff to a guy who's kind of injury prone. James Conner already missed a couple of games this year. He's missed a couple of games every year that he's been in the NFL. And so this is somebody to hang on to. Can't really start him at this point, even if you're desperate. But Ingram, especially if you do have Conner, is somebody to stack. And then we have another new handcuff in Chicago this time because Khalil Herbert is on IR. So welcome Tristan Ebner. Now, Ebner's a guy I'm actually kind of interested in the preseason because he's somebody who we know has a very set skill set, and that is catching the ball out of the backfield. He, in college, had a 10% target share, which for a running back is pretty high, and he went over 20 receptions in every year that he was in college. Well, Chicago now offense is a little different. This is a team that's not dumping the ball off to the running back because they have a quarterback who can just take off and go and run for 150 yards. So things are a little different than we thought they might be. We see Montgomery is now the lead back, of course, clearly not going to split time with Herbert. So I don't expect Ebner to take over the Herbert role. He's not as effective a runner as Herbert. Herbert was just really good. Ebner will see some carries. He also has that skill set. If they need it, they'll dump it off to him. But again, more of a handcuff here, a guy that if you have Montgomery, who is now going to be getting a much bigger workload in terms of the backfield, Ebner is the backup here. Ebner is the guy who will take over if Monty gets hurt. And Monty himself has been hurt also a little bit this year and last year. So even though this is the leading rushing offense in the NFL, of course we know that's because their quarterback can run the ball. He's their leading rusher. He's, more effective than a lot of running backs out there in the league. But this is still a run-first offense, and Ebner will have value if something happens to Montgomery. Now, all of a sudden, we need a lot of help at tight end because Zach Ertz out for the season. Dallas Goedert, well, not out the whole year, but he's going to be out multiple weeks. And so a lot of these tight ends you were counting on are just not there anymore. Well, in Philadelphia, maybe the replacement will be in-house. They have a couple of guys. Some people are looking at Jack Stoll as the guy who's going to be the starter, and he might actually be the technical starter at tight end. But the one you might be more interested in for fantasy purposes is the rookie, Grant Calcaterra. This is somebody who is more of a pass-catching tight end. Stoll is really just a blocker. I mean, he's really touchdown or bust, and I don't see him getting too many looks in the red zone. I think they'll work Calcaterra into the mix more. That's why they drafted him. Look, even though they have a guy like Dallas Goedert, with Ertz gone and Stoll just being a blocker, they need somebody to kind of fill that void. And so somebody who has an 87th percentile speed score, he's more of an athlete. Obviously, being a rookie tight end, going to be a little bit raw, and I don't expect a ton of targets, but he's the one I think could make that play, could be used more in the red zone. So if you're looking for a replacement at tight end, Calcaterra is a name to look into. And what if you want a deep stash for wide receiver for later in the season? You're looking ahead to the playoffs. Good on you. Well, here's a name that might be surprising because you haven't heard much all year from David Bell in Cleveland. A lot of people are interested in him through the draft process because put up big numbers in college and then also went to a team that needed receiver help in Cleveland. I mean, you got Amari Cooper as the clear one. Donovan Peoples-Jones he's the two, but kind of by default. I like him, but again, he's not necessarily, star in the making for sure. We don't know what we're getting from him. David Bell had a chance to kind of inherit that slot role and be a starter. Working his way into the mix, of course, this is a run-heavy offense with Jacoby Brissett, but we'll see things open up at least a little bit when Watson is a starter. And David Bell is now getting a little bit more involved. Last week saw his highest target share of the season, which was 5. Not overwhelming, but again, baby steps here. We could see him get more involved, not just as he gets comfortable in the offense and they need him more, but also when Watson is there at quarterback and they just feel more comfortable passing the ball. Now, as far as schedules, I'll tell you the next 2 weeks, he's not going to be in your lineup. He shouldn't be really anyways, but against Buffalo and then Tampa Bay, again, you're not going to see much from him, and that's okay because then you get some good matchups for Cleveland. Houston, that Baltimore defense is better, but the pass defense still susceptible. New Orleans, not a good defense at all. So you could see Bell-Watson connection here finally formulate late in the season. And then finally, you're looking for a quarterback to stash. Well, maybe Jameis Winston will finally come back. It's not happening right now. Sticking with Andy Dalton, and a lot of it is health-related reasons. Jameis Winston, he's got fractured vertebrae. It's not something that's just going to go away, and he might not really be healthy all season. But at some point, Dennis Allen, who is a new coach / old coach who kind of finds himself in the hot seat already, might have to make a change because Andy Dalton not getting the job done. He hasn't been terrible, but they're not winning games and they're not putting up points and their defense isn't good enough to compensate for that. So at some point late in the season, they might be forced to go to Winston just to see what he can do. If he can stay all together, we know that he's got the arm. He's capable of putting up some numbers. Now, I wouldn't recommend this in a single quarterback league. Look, even in a one quarterback league at this point, you shouldn't be stashing and hoping and waiting for even a guy like Watson. You should have a quarterback by now you can rely on. But if you don't, Winston is worth a stash with deep enough benches, and in Superflex leagues, definitely worth holding on to in case he does come back. All right, those are your early waiver wire stashes and pickups to get ahead of the game. We have you covered as always. Check out our full playlist for this week with start, sit advice, waiver advice, trade advice, and everything you need to help you win.